The Newsday continues here on One News Now. I'm Maricel Halil. Former Senator Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte are making it official. They will be running as a tandem for the 2022 polls. Reporting live from Davao del Norte, we have Jem Avancenia. Jem, what's the latest?
Maricel, the Marcos Duterte tandem was formally launched today through a unity caravan here in Tagum City, Davao del Norte. Thousands of supporters coming from different parts of Mindanao held a motorcade to welcome the tandem. This is the first time Marcos and Duterte, both children of Philippine strongmen, met since the Davao mayor filed her candidacy as a substitute for vice presidential candidate for the CMD. In a speech, Duterte said Marcos has enough experience as a local official and a legislator, making him the most qualified to be the next president. Recall that Duterte teamed up with Marcos instead of her father's longtime aide, Senator Bongo, who is also running for president in 2022. For his part, Marcos thanked the local executive for choosing him and said their political partnership will be the start of unity among Filipinos. Officials and candidates of the regional party, Hugpong ng Pagbabago, which the Davao mayor founded and chairs, are also here to support the tandem. HNP President Davao Occidental Governor Claudio Bautista said the party will be supporting Marcos and Duterte in the coming elections. Maricel, while HNP is throwing its support behind the Marcos Duterte tandem, other pro-Sara groups in Davao said they are rooting for Bongo for president, while Mayor Sara Duterte for vice president in 2022. Maricel?
Thank you for the update. That was Jem Avancenia reporting live from Tagum City, Davao del Norte. Here are other developments in Philippine politics. Presidential aspirant and Vice President Leni Robredo vowed to focus more on the fishery sector should she win the election in 2022. Robredo told fisher folks in Mulanay, Quezon that she will push for a so-called blue economy that will benefit their livelihood. Another presidential Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, meanwhile, visited Payatas in Quezon City. Moreno called this a meet and greet of garbage collectors, referring to himself as one of them. He vowed to launch an efficient biological waste management system, like turning garbage collecting into a productive livelihood. And labor leader Calio de Guzman, who is also gunning for the country's top post, went to Los Baños, Laguna to talk to barangay officials and fisherfolk organizations. They discussed the issue of environmental exploitation and problems in the Laguna de Bay. We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Maricel Halili. With COVID-19 cases continuing to drop, the OCTA Research Group is projecting even lower numbers in the coming week and by December. In an earlier interview here on One News, OCTA Research fellow Professor Guido David said cases could reach less than 1,000 by the end of November. On Sunday, the country recorded over 2,200 new COVID-19 cases. Despite this, David urged,
we think right now the trajectories, we will probably decrease to less than 1,000 cases by next week, by the end of November. But if it continues, we might even decrease it further down to 500 cases per day, which would be really great if that happens.
Despite this, David urged the government to hold off on allowing children inside malls. But David, meanwhile, backed the shorter quarantine period for tourists and returning OFWs.
We're actually in favor of a shorter quarantine, as long as they still get their RT-PCR testing. Preferably even before they depart their country of origin, I think they should already have their RT-PCR test results.
Over in Europe, some governments are mulling to reimpose lockdowns and implement compulsory vaccination. This as some countries start seeing a COVID-19 relapse. Let's watch this.
Your read on what's taking place in Europe right now. Access to vaccines very high across the continent. There's a struggle at the moment and restrictions are coming back. What do you understand is happening at the moment in these nations?
Yeah, it's very difficult to really understand all of this because we've got cases in Germany, in Austria that are higher than at any time in this pandemic, higher than before we had vaccines, before we had antivirals, before we even knew much about how this virus was transmitting. And the second thing is, remember, anything that you implement now to reduce case numbers won't be seen for another 7 to 10 days at least in terms of its effectiveness. So you've got a window of time now where these record numbers of cases are going to continue to climb for at least 7 days, perhaps 2 weeks. And it's can't be emphasized enough, primarily driven by unvaccinated, but we now really have to put boosters on the table to try to see if we can get protection in the vaccinated population to those 90+% levels that we were hoping to see at the beginning of the pandemic or at the beginning of the vaccine rollout.
Andy, what's the threshold to impose some of these stricter measures? The idea here of hospitalizations perhaps or deaths, but not necessarily infection rates.
Yeah, the hospitalization number is really the critical number because, there will be some breakthrough cases in vaccinated individuals, but those should really skew towards symptomatic diseases that aren't going to cause you to go to the hospital. So watching the hospitalization rate and how that tracks with the case numbers is going to be important. Here in the U.S., that has gone, the hospitalization and death rates have been lower than the case rates now that we have vaccination out there. But we have to follow the hospitalization rate because that's going to be the one that really tells us about stresses on the medical system.
Andy, I remember about a year ago, perhaps a little bit more, we got news that the vaccines were incredibly effective and would prevent both infection as well as the actual development of more severe complications. Are we rethinking that? Are these vaccines not as effective as we thought that they were?
The context of effectiveness is what's changed, and the emergence of Delta has really sort of caused us to reassess a lot of those initial vaccination efficacy numbers. Now, with boosters coming on board, there's good evidence suggesting that boosters might be able to restore us to that 90+% efficacy, because boosters, particularly if they're being given 6 months or so after your initial vaccination, seem to be resulting in much higher antibody levels, and we assume that those levels will now last much longer. So now the game is changing a little bit. We're moving to that long-term immunity, and now boosters may be important for both getting greater short-term immunity and establishing that longer 6-month, 1-year immunity that'll protect you from COVID.
For more updates, visit News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World Online. Visit our website, onenews.ph, for more in-depth analysis. You can also catch One News on the Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Maricel Harini. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.